And we're back. So I'm just going to kind of go through building an HTML page with some basic CSS on it. I'm going to use Wired as kind of a starting point, though it's got some weird gritty things here, so that might be a little strange. But I want to kind of focus on covering all the core HTML pieces and some basics of CSS. So stop me if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of roll with this and we'll see where we get. I won't spend more than an hour working on this, so I don't know how far we'll get with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've already got a folder set up here, so I'm just going to create a new directory inside of my projects folder for this specific project, and then I'll create my basic files so that I can start actually putting content in them. So for here, I'm just going to create a directory and call it week 1 wired. Okay, so now that I'm in here, I know that I'm going to basically kind of emulate this site, but I'm only going to make it a single page, so I'm just going to create an index.html page and a main CSS file. So if you haven't seen the touch command before, touch creates an empty file with whatever file name you pass. So if I run my directory listing, I can see I've got both files in there. Yep. Huh. Look at that. So we'll get you guys set up with this command. But this is a way to run Sublime Text, the editor that we're using. You can do this with other text editors if you want. But this allows us to run Sublime Text on files or directories right from terminal. So I'll just run Sublime on the current directory, so dot is wherever we currently are. And I may have to do it twice. Nope.
Command K, Command B.
Yeah, it didn't work.
Didn't work?
No. Huh. That's weird. View sidebar. There it is. So in my project right now, week 1 wired, I've got index.html and main CSS. Can you guys read the sidebar text? That's kind of small. Good enough? You've got great eyes back there. That's awesome. All right, so I'm going to hop into the HTML page. You guys made some HTML pages for the pre-work, right? And you've worked with HTML before and some CSS before. Can anybody tell me what I need to start my document with?
Last time.
Mm-hmm. So the reason for this, doc type is really important because it tells the browser what version of HTML we're using. In this case, the modern standard for HTML5 is just to say HTML. There's some different HTML types like XHTML and transitional HTML, and those all have certain styles and specifics about how you're supposed to write the HTML, what tags you can use, and how you can use them. HTML5 is kind of freeing that up a little bit. XHTML required if you had a self-closing tag, you had to put the end slash in there. HTML5 doesn't require that, so it helps us be a little bit cleaner with our code. So I've created my doc type. I need to now say that I'm going to write some HTML, so it needs to know where I'm doing that. So I'm going to start with an HTML tag here. And of course, I've got to close the HTML tag because it needs to know when I'm done. And there are 2 key parts inside the HTML tag. Does anybody know what those 2 elements are going to be? Head and body. Yep. Ooh, look at that. All that autocomplete. So the head defines information about our HTML page. It's like metadata for the page itself. It doesn't get rendered, so this is where we'll put our CSS. We want CSS included in the header. We'll put information like the title, what's going to show up in the tab or on the title bar of our page. We'll define what sort of character set we're using. We can define keywords that'll help with SEO or some Facebook-specific things like Facebook graph title or keywords there. So we'll define a lot of information about our page inside the header set, and then the actual content of our page will go inside the body of the HTML. So in here, the first thing I want to define is a meta, and a meta tag is just kind of meta about the document. So in this case, we want to tell it that the character set that we're using is UTF-8. Rain, what does UTF stand for? Universal Text Format?
Unicode?
Unicode text. There's a couple different character sets that you can use. If you're using a foreign character set, you want to specify that. In this case, UTF-8 will allow us to use special symbols, right? We have symbols like dots and arrows and things that you wouldn't find on your keyboard, but you might find in the Mac. There's like a character insertion window that you can open up, and you could put special characters in as well. So in this case, we're just telling the browser, number one, this is an HTML5 document. So we've started that off here. We're telling it, number two, we're using the UTF-8 character set. The browser already knows enough about our site to be able to render it the way that we want it to.
Does it default to a character set if you don't specify?
I don't know. Do you know if it defaults?
Different browsers default to different things, so this is an important cross-browser addition.
So at this point, this is basically boilerplate. I mean, we could stick a title in here. Call this wired dot not. And I mean, we can load this page up. Has anybody ever used Sublime Text before, or are you guys new to Sublime Text? New to Sublime Text? No, you're a pro, seasoned vet, semi-seasoned vet. I love Sublime Text, and I know Rain loves Sublime Text.
You will all love it too.
You'll all love Sublime Text.
Yeah. Laws currently prevent you from marrying text editors, but I'm crossing my fingers.
Yeah, someday.
Sublime Text, so.
If even writing regular documents, I wish it had some of the functionality that Sublime Text has. And we'll show you a lot of the shortcuts as we're going along. One of the most powerful features in Sublime Text is multi-editing. I'll just show it to you right now because it's super cool. So if I have a cursor here, I can type whatever I want. If I hold the command key and click somewhere else, I now have two cursors. Or I can type whatever I want. And that's all I'm going to show you for now. So a useful thing here is because we're working on just some basic HTML, this is all within the local file system, so we don't have a server, we don't have a URL to go to. Really, we're just going to load this file up. I could navigate to this file and open it up in Chrome. I could go to Chrome and run the open command and load in the file. Fortunately here, if we're in an HTML page, I can right-click on the file and go right to Open in Browser. And it just loads my file right up in the browser. So that's just a quick way. You bypass the whole file system, just right-click on your file and open it in the browser. I think this only works for HTML, and it really only works for the local file system because where you end up is exactly where your file is using the file protocol. the file : // So we're not using http : / or https. This is specific to the file system. Any questions so far? This all seems pretty standard. Cool. So far. All right. Let's take a look at Wired and do a little analysis here. So it looks like we're going to have a header bit here with the Wired logo inside. I think this is more the meat of the site, so this seems more like a featured section to me. And then we have a sort of navigation structure here, a sidebar, scroll down. Looks like they've got another bit of content here and a footer. So I'll start with the main piece here. Maybe I'll put one piece into this featured section. I'll put the nav in there, list out some of these items here, throw in the sidebar, and put the footer in there. And we'll just kind of see where that ends up. So let's start defining the content. So inside of my body tag, I'm going to start by defining a, let's do a header tag. So this is an HTML5 specific tag. This just basically says I'm going to define something that's known as a header. This could be the main header, it could be a subheader, it could be a header and a header. I wouldn't do that, but you could. So this will be our main header here. And inside here right now all we have is that Wired logo, so I'll throw in an image tag. Sorry. I think all of your Sublime texts have this. There's helpful auto-completion. So if you know what tag you want to type in, for instance, I want to type in an image tag, you can try this out. I don't know if it'll work on yours. Once you've typed that out, just hit Tab, and it'll complete that element. Did it work?
It did.
Okay.
It doesn't have alt, but it has source.
That's enough. So that's just a really handy thing, and it's also nice too the way that they do that tab completion, because it puts your cursor right in where you need it. And if I hit Tab again, it will go to the other section. So it's pretty handy. For now, I'm just going to reference their image. So I'm going to go to my developer tools, inspect their logo, and just grab this URL. So I'm copying a link address here. Let me know if you need me to slow down if you're following along. So I've copied in that URL, and I'll just paste that in. Usually this is not a good idea, and the reason is because I'm now relying on somebody else's website for my content. So in this case, what I really should do is download the image and save the image and reference my own image. But even that is kind of a little sketchy because it's not really your content. But the reason that I say this isn't quite a good idea is because if they take this image down, our site is going to look like crap. So we want to make sure that we're in control of our own content and we're not relying on other people too much. So let's just save that and see what we get. Should have an image. Okay. So before we go too much further, well, actually, no, I'll keep going through with this. So then I'm going to create a section here, and for this one, I'll call this main. So main is an HTML5 tag. So main is considered the content of your page. This is something that's specific to your page. Something that's not usually a reusable element like the header, your main header, or your main footer, or your sidebar, right? Main is like the meat of your page. Everything else are components that go outside of that. So we'll have a main section here, and then just for now, I'll add a footer. And so now we kind of have a base scaffold for our layout. So inside of main, I'm going to put in a featured section. Oops. And here, let's just give it a class of featured. So here we've added an attribute to our section element that defines a class on that element that we can use. So inside of the featured bit, let's see what Wired has. So we've got a couple listed things. It looks like 2 columns. Some of them have subcolumns. Let's see. We'll do two divs in here. Bless you. And I'll give this a class of left column. And then div right column. So the way that I'm kind of thinking through this is I'm thinking of how I want my content to show up in terms of the HTML. Like, how am I going to lay this out? I'm going to have to group things together. I'm going to have to keep my content in places where it makes sense from an HTML standpoint. But I also want to think about, how am I going to do this in CSS? How am I going to take these 2 items and put them on the left side? How am I going to separate these 2 items from these 3 items? How am I going to separate all of these items from this item? So think a little bit about the CSS, not necessarily what you're going to use. Sure, you could say, okay, this is going to have a background color of black, but past that, you may not have a full definition of how that's going to work. But to think about how you're going to group these things together, what sort of tags are you going to use? If you look at a list of all the HTML tags that we have access to, it's huge. We have so many different things that we can use instead of div or p, right? We will definitely use those. You use the tags when they make sense, but you could run into divitis, right? Where a div is anything. You could use a div for all of the content on your page and just give it a class. But then it's not bad. It's just not as readable. It's not as clear what the content is. And we have ways to say these different words, right? Like we could say like all the time, but there are other words to use that say the same thing or mean the same thing. So we can be more eloquent with how we speak our HTML, and that's why I'm trying to use the headers and the mains and the sections. Here div, this is a generic element, so it can be whatever we want.